We have a bit of a split decision when it comes to the design aspect for this Versus, because we have certain people at Android Authority who prefer the Nexus 6P over the Huawei Mate 8. That said, the Nexus 6P happens to have that black bar on the top that some people do sometimes feel is out of place. On the other hand, you have the Mate 8, which has a more symmetrical design language, but it is a very familiar design if you are familiar with the Mate 7. But premium materials are really par for the course here, no matter which of these two you get. The unibody designs really lend to a very nice looking and feeling device, and they really feel great in the hand, even despite some slippage due to that smooth metal. But the sides are nice and flat on both of these, and as far as sizes go, there is a slightly taller device in the Nexus 6P due to the dual front-facing stereo speakers and its 5.7-inch display, while you have a slightly wider phone in the Huawei Mate 8 because of its 6-inch display. In general, though, both of these devices show a lot of what Huawei is able to make, and the build quality is absolutely solid across the board. So, really, it's up to you which one looks better. The Nexus 6P did just recently get a gold edition, and we personally would love to see, in the flesh, the mocha brown version of the Huawei Mate 8. The display situation might actually be a little bit easier for those of you who are spec hungry, and that's because the Quad HD display on the Nexus 6P is simply better than the 1080p on the Mate 8, so that would be a pretty easy decision for you guys. That said, the 1080p IPS display on the Mate 8 is no slouch, even if it doesn't quite have the punched out colors that the AMOLED provides. But media and gaming across the board is still very enjoyable no matter which of these two that you pick. And if you want that little bit of extra color depth and also the higher resolution, then of course the Nexus 6P will provide that little bit extra for you. It's just that in terms of sheer enjoyment for the general user, we don't see that much of a difference between these two. Performance is actually a great aspect for these two devices going head-to-head because you have the two different scenarios. You have the stock Android experience being powered by a powerful Snapdragon 810 processor in the Nexus 6P. But on the other hand, you have an in-house made processing package that is supposed to contend with the software, more saturated and more feature-heavy EMUI. But we have to give Huawei a lot of credit because in either case, they have managed to excel. Not only is speed really great on both of these, but it's been very smooth and reliable, and no matter what we do for both of these devices, we haven't really been able to slow them down one bit. Multitasking and pretty much getting through all of the more Google-like features in the stock Android experience, Android Marshmallow of the Nexus 6P, bring the kind of experience that you would want out of a Nexus device. But on the other hand, even with its more feature-heavy package, the Mate 8 is able to move along swimmingly with no issues at all. And for those of you that were worried that the Mali graphics of the Mate 8 would kind of fall short compared to the Adreno, we actually don't think that there is actually a big difference between the two, as we've had fun playing games on both without any problems. So while the Nexus 6P provides the kind of experience you would want from a stock Android device, what you also get in the Mate 8 is a proving ground for the HiSilicon Kirin 950, and Huawei is really proving itself no matter which of these two scenarios you pick. Hardware actually takes on a different type of story this time around, and that's because the Nexus line tends to have the more bare-bones experience, while the OEM flagships tend to have a lot more features. But this time around, the gap has actually been a lot more narrowed. We'll start off with the great fingerprint readers on the back of either device. These are still the best in class and provide a seamless and indispensable tool. It's easy to just let the index finger land on the area on the back of the phone, and then your phone is already awoken and unlocked very easily. As far as the sound situation goes, of course you have the dual front-facing speakers of the 6P, which provide a great sound experience. Now, that's obviously going to be better than the bottom-mounted speaker here of the Huawei Mate 8, which does provide some pretty good body in the sound, but just doesn't get quite as loud. And ultimately, it's just a few steps back compared to the great experience you find on the 6P. Huawei did a great job of providing every radio possible for each Mate 8 that you might get, so you can literally use this phone pretty much everywhere around the world. But the Nexus 6P is also quite versatile, and you can find versions of it that are compatible with pretty much any major carrier across the markets that it's being put in. But speaking of connectivity, you also have dual SIM capabilities in the Huawei Mate 8, while the Nexus 6P doesn't provide that kind of functionality. And one of those trays inside of the Mate 8 can actually be used for a micro SD card, so expandable storage is something that the OEM flagship can boast over the Nexus line once again. And finally, the part everyone should be talking about when it comes to a Huawei device: power. What we have in the Google Nexus 6P is a 3450 mAh battery that is powered and charged by USB Type-C. Now, Type-C cords are still a little bit harder to come by and have taken some getting used to, even for us here at Android Authority, but it does charge the battery in a very short amount of time. So when you get your day and a half about worth of power from the Nexus 6P, you can get it charged up pretty easily without having to fuss too much. But then we have the 4,000 milliamp hour battery inside of the Huawei Mate 8, in which the EMUI actually does a very aggressive job of making sure you know certain applications are taking up too much power. And you can actually blacklist a number of them inside of the optimizer in order to make sure that the power consumption is right where you want it to be. And with that, 2 days of battery life can actually be the norm with the Huawei Mate 8, and that's nothing short of amazing. And we haven't even mentioned yet that the fast charging available with the Mate 8 is able to charge the phone for a full day's worth of battery in just about half an hour. You really can't go wrong with either of these phones in terms of power, but if you really are a power user and you need your phone to really go the distance, the Mate 8 is definitely the companion you just might be looking for. As we get into the cameras, the spec shows that the 12 megapixel shooter of the Nexus 6P doesn't have optical image stabilization compared to that of the Mate 8, which does and has 16 megapixels. However, the actual pixel sizes are a bit different between these two, and we see in the camera samples later if they actually make a difference. But for now, we're focusing on the application. The applications on both of these are very different, as the Nexus 6P's Google camera provides a number of different options, some modes, but really it's a more what you see is what you get interface with Auto HDR. Now I mention Auto HDR because you have to actually open up a mode in the Mate 8 in order to take advantage of it. That said, the Mate 8 does provide even more modes, a lot of different ways of getting the kind of shot that you want, including even a manual mode that does work pretty well if you need to tweak the shot for a better picture. But as we get into the actual camera samples themselves, we do find a bit of discrepancy between the two, with the Nexus 6P's larger pixel sizes just barely making it that much better than the Mate 8 in brighter situations. There's a bit more color depth also in the Nexus 6P's photos, and especially when you're using HDR, it just simply has a much better way of interpreting the scene than the Mate 8, which sometimes doesn't even look like it's doing much at all when you have HDR enabled. While you could sort of give or take in very bright situations between these two phones, it's when the situations get dimmer that you actually see the Nexus 6P's just bolstering its hardware that much better. You get much darker photos and much grainier photos inside of the Huawei Mate 8, which simply just don't provide the same type of quality that the Nexus 6P does. It was a bit disheartening to see that the Mate 8 provided a lackluster camera experience overall, as they already proved that they could do a good one in the Nexus 6P. So, the Nexus 6P is simply the better camera companion that you should have in your pocket. And finally, we have software. Now, this is one of those categories that would be really easy for a lot of people to pick between because either you're a stock Android purist or you actually enjoy all of the extra features that might come in an OEM skin. We do have Android Marshmallow at the helm in both of these devices, so a number of the same features can be found, like Google Now on tap. That said, however, the stock Android experience is definitely very streamlined, and it doesn't look like it's even trying all that hard. And if you compare it to the Huawei Mate 8's EMUI, it also has an app drawer, and a lot of people really gravitate to that, especially here in the West. But the stock Android experience does provide just exactly what you need without too many extras. And if extras are what you need, then the Mate 8 might be where you have to look. But the EMUI is a controversial software suite because a number of its features simply are not all that useful. The knuckle feature, for example, is one that you can't really trigger without sometimes punching the device. And if you are already failing at using the knuckle feature, then maybe you could have just hit the icon already and would have been on your way. The dual window function, aside from using the recent app screen, is also fairly useless because there aren't that many applications that you can actually use with it. And again, we mentioned the lack of an app drawer, which really makes it a bit tougher to keep clean when compared to the app drawer found in the stock Android iteration. We do have to give credit where credit is due, however, as the power consumption features inside of EMUI are the reason why its battery can go the distance. So we give it a lot of credit there, and some customization can be had on here in order to make this version of Android actually look a little bit better for you. But ultimately, we find ourselves installing third-party launchers just so we can make EMUI look a little bit more the way we want it to here at Android Authority, and that's more of a stock-like experience. The Nexus 6P starts at $449 at the Google Play Store and is available in many Western markets, but the Huawei Mate 8 is not going to be made available in the US, though you can always import it and use it because of all the radios that it has. But that will cost you even more as it comes in at the general flagship price of at least $600 or $700. And so, there you have it for this versus between the Huawei Mate 8 and the Nexus 6P. These are two of the best devices that Huawei has ever put out, and it really shows just how much they've matured as you have a very great experience underneath the hood and great materials on the outside. And between these two, it really is a matter of what exactly you really need. While the Nexus 6P provides the stock Android experience, very smooth, very snappy, and reliable, and a good battery experience, you also get the front-facing speakers and the promise of the updates that Google has always made for the Nexus program. But on the other hand, if power is really what you need, then we can't fault the Mate 8 for really showing us just what it's like to have 2 days worth of battery life. But that does come at the expense of the front-facing speakers. You do get expandable storage, and you get the regular USB cord if that is something you are still getting used to in the Nexus with Type-C, but you also get a software experience that a lot of us here in the West simply are not really all that much down for.